Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 421 and my guest is Nicholas Seedsman. Nicholas is a veteran of the Australian Special Forces with 3 tours of combat duty. He's the founder of Warrior Refit, a foundation that advocates for and raises money in support of stem cell treatment for full spectrum regenerative intervention to improve the quality of life for veterans. That's a mouthful, but let me explain. After leaving the military, Nick was significantly disabled, and through extraordinary and costly stem cell treatments, he found a better quality of life and a lot of healing. He said that his life changed dramatically with the treatment from, quote, operating at a 2 to 4% of life with only 2 to 3 months left to live, unquote, to a dramatic upswing of 70% and continually getting better. He says he's now capable to live a full active life, and he really was on the brink of not being with us anymore. So it's a major deal. Stem cell research, there's money going into it, but it's really costly to do the treatments. So his foundation helps raise money for others to get that life-saving treatment. Really interesting guy, lovely conversation. We talked for a long time, actually, before we even hit the record button. So really nice man, and enjoyed that conversation. And I think you will too. General stuff, Hey Human Podcast is on YouTube under official Susan Ruth. I'm on Patreon at Susan Ruthism, and we've been doing monthly get-togethers. We talk about everything from books to philosophy to where people are from to anecdotal bits about life in general. It's a lot of fun, so sign up for Patreon and be a part of that. I'm now on TikTok at Susan Ruthism, SUSANRUTHISM, and check out HeyHumanPodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show, SusanRuth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors, and follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media, although I'm considering blending the two and making Hey Human Podcast just into my Susan Ruthism. It's a lot to try and manage all these social medias on my own, so I think that might be a better way to do it, but we'll see what happens. Find my albums, all my music on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever, and rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. On Spotify. It's everywhere. Mostly. I'm sure it's missing some places, but let me know and I'll try and get the show on there too. Thank you, and I appreciate the listens. I appreciate that you're sharing in your community with your friends and family, and take care of yourself, be well, be love, and here we go. Nicholas Seedsman, welcome to Hey Human.
Thanks, Susan. How you doing?
I'm doing well. And you're in Paris currently, but you're a man of the world, yes?
Apparently I am, yeah.
What are you doing in Paris?
I was just in Cannes Film Festival, and then from there, thank God, like I wasn't there forever. Some people are staying 1 to 2 weeks, and it is a lot of socializing. Like, it's pretty heavy. After 4 days, I'm like, I think I've had my fill. But my brother was in Bordeaux with his wife and my nephew. So, and I don't get to see them that often. They're in Australia. I rarely go back, and I just seized the opportunity to go spend a few days in Bordeaux with them, and then a few days in Paris. And now I'm just hanging out in Paris.
Paris? You speak French?
Yeah, generally. Yeah, not perfect, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, enough so nobody gets mad at you.
Yeah, it's the Parisians, right? They're like, they're not saying get mad at you. This is how I would best describe them. They would get upset if you didn't, but as soon as you speak French and they realize it's not your native language, they will correct you with English immediately and start speaking English to you. Like, so what's the point of this dance, guys? Like, why the drama? Like, just
you had to prove that you were at least trying, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, my French is pretty good. Like, they'll entertain me for like minutes or 10 minutes or whatever until it's like I can hang out with people that only speak French, but it gets to a point where it's like, all right, there's a word here we're losing, and then they'll jump in.
The minute you ask for almond milk in your coffee, they're like, no, this is done. We're done.
Yeah, there are a few moments like I learned when I was living in Colombia that if you want toothpaste, you'd better damn well work out how you ask for the right toothpaste because no one's coming to rescue you. So I've got all these like really weird tangent ways of requesting things so that it's like, to describe what it is that I want to help lead them to that particular thing.
That's where all of the years of Pictionary come in handy. Pantomime is the key to everything.
I'm Australian. We didn't have Pictionary. We only had Pictionary in the American movies. That's it. That's all we had. So I'm just going off what my general concept of Pictionary is in my mind.
Somebody needs to get you a Pictionary game because it is super duper fun.
I'm missing out.
All right, let's get into your story. Obviously, we know you're Australian. Talk about your upbringing a little bit, what shaped you as a kid, how you went on the path that you went on.
Oh yeah. So this one's pretty interesting. My father, my grandfather, and uncle were homicide detectives in New South Wales, and they were particularly good at it. My father is still cited as like case studies on how to do it. I guess that changed a whole bunch of things in my childhood, right? My father and mother knew each other in high school, ended up marrying, having a long relationship for probably like, almost 20 years, but because they started early. And that went until about the ages of, let's say like 30, 34, 35, where my father went through the full PTSD journey from just seeing too many dead bodies and whatever comes of that, right? Like too many, dead and just horrific shit. So that shaped my childhood, right? So I grew up, I was young, at about 4 or 5, parents divorced, separated. My mother went cold before that. I went particularly cold afterwards. She's lovely. Like I have a great relationship with both of them, but I very much just speak the truth, from whatever lens that I'm seeing it. I've done an awful amount as a result of my life journey to do self-development work via spiritual, emotional, mental, embodiment, whatever it might be. And as a result of that, I'm pretty well enlightened about my own journey. And they separated. That had its own effects on my brother, had its own effects on me, which I'm now learning how to, parent myself better as an adult in the best ways and to steer the ship and correct the course based on those effects that it had on me and decisions that I've made.
How old were you when they divorced?
4, I think about 4.
Quite young.
4 or 5. Yeah, it was pretty young. So it was like a lot of it was over my head, but it got really confusing when I started spending time with my dad. And he had another woman, and it was became his wife, and he's still married to her. So it's like that era was a little bit confusing. But I just, I'm a kid. I just roll with the punches, right? My brother, I think he took it a little bit differently, or he took it fine, a bit quieter about the situation, or maybe less happy. So that we grow up. My mum ends up meeting her partner, became my stepfather. And he was fine initially, but then, like a year into it, when I was about 10 years old, when I think they kind of got together and started getting married, he just pretty much like mercilessly bullied me, which gave me some cool superpowers, right? Like looking at life in the right lens here, like whatever that might have been, the gift from God there, I got an immense superpower of resilience. I learned to like it. So it would basically, we'd read at the dinner table every night. And it was, I'd just be sitting there and listen to an ambush of how I wasn't good enough at anything. And I'm a kid. So it's like, as an adult now, you're like, this is pretty irrelevant.
And your mom didn't step in and protect you.
Mom didn't, brother didn't, no one did. They just watched it for like the better part of 7 years. And I thought
if it was happening to you, it didn't happen to them, probably.
Yeah, at all. So it was like, it was pretty black and white. And I was the weakest in the house, even when they had a child. Like he didn't pick on his own child. It was a bit like that. So cool. So be it. I was a kid, didn't know any difference, but that shapes my adulthood and my emotions. I was able to bury my emotions like really well. It was a struggle at first, just burying your emotions. I was a bit of a softer emotional kid, like in some regards, but I learned to be super resilient and bury all those. And as a result of burying your emotions, the body and the mind are very much connected. I was able to make my body completely numb to push through whatever ridiculous task I wanted it to go through. I had to learn how to socialize really well. I had to learn how to build relationships very well because I needed third parties to kind of be there for me in case, this evident circumstance wasn't there for me. My mom's lovely. She's worked her ass off, but she was under the understanding that providing a home and food and all these things and be diligent at that was the best way she could take care of the kids. And she definitely did that. And as we get older, she's learned a lot, and she's, the best version of herself, and very, very, all that love in her life has come back. So that's great to see. But it shaped me so that as soon as I did pretty well in school. I was pretty smart. I was generally autodidactic in many ways, but just really cared about the social side of things. I could get through class and pass tests and exams without having to do any study, because I could just kind of memorize things pretty well and process information like, that I interested in me, like, very well. Like if it was history, or if it was drama or the arts or whatever, depending on the arts, right? Like me painting is I'd probably rather shoot myself in many ways. Like, let's leave that till I'm like the old Churchill version, where you're like, you know what, let's fire it up. So yeah, so I did that, and whatever I adored, I was great at, and then whatever I didn't, I was fine at. So no one was ever like, coming at me for grades or anything, which made it interesting that there was even bullying at all. So it was like it was about whatever. I proceeded to get to the end of my 16th year, and as I was getting to the end of it, I'm just like, well, I know I want to be in the military. Like I loved drama and acting in school, and everyone was trying to push me towards these schools, like the performance arts schools, and then go on to the next phases of that. And I loved war and geopolitics and history. And for me, it was like, well, damned if I'm gonna skip that step and not have a good nudge at that. So I as soon as I turned 17, I went into the military as electrical engineer, and that set off its own journey. The toothpaste back in the tube at that point. I went in, like all in.
Does Australia require service?
No, not required. No, it's not mandatory in any capacity. It was just just what I was meant to do in many ways. And that was probably my youth, to summarize it. My youth to me was pretty, like, I look back now and I don't really remember a lot of things, because I don't think it just wasn't, other than how it shaped me, it wasn't as interesting as what I'd made my adult life to be,
Yeah. Were you already showing signs of being a polyglot and polymath at that point? I'm sure the military notices things like that and tunnels you in a certain direction.
I think I don't actually think they do. I think the military is just like the cream will rise to the top by their own sheer will. It doesn't have to look out for things like you would think so in a movie, where someone might touch you on the shoulder. It's like those people striving exceptionally well stand out and continue to strive, and they end up where they are as a result of that, like of just being as diligent and as competent and as focused as they possibly can. So, yeah, like I would say there was no observation for it. I just kept going for things younger than I just want to be the youngest at most things. Like I would definitely try to, I wouldn't let age affect me in any capacity.
But you're already pretty young, it sounds like.
Joining at 17, it was like, okay, cool. The other people around me were all grown men. Everyone going through training was grown men, especially when it was very aware of it when I was always good socializing. So I was able to build like really good rapport just through just being authentic. And as a result of that, I had great relationships with guys of all these different ages around me. But some of the guys are like, they'd finished school the same day I was born, or like I was 17 and they're like 45. It was like, a mixed bag of maturity. And then also all the people in charge of me were definitely older, up into the age of maybe 60. But when it came to the electrical engineering, I was a little bit out of my depth, to say the least, but out of my sheer will, I was going to like work it out or die trying.
Mm-hmm.
So I started, everyone around me had degrees or whatever already, right? Or up to master's degrees. And I just like high school, I was a little bit out of my depth in that regard, but it just means I had to study harder. And even then the studying was a challenge of interest, because I already knew what I wanted to do in the military. I wanted to get as like every child dream. Like if I was going to be in the military, I wanted to be the greatest warrior I could be. And I was going to punch as high and as fast as I possibly could until I had the coolest job and did all the warrior stuff. However, the education was like a safety net of having something and falling back on something. And these things that I don't know who, like, the average person might say, we're like, oh, you need something to fall back on, as a bit like a safety net. I've never seen more relevance to that than I do now in this phase of my life. But at that time, I found myself out of my depth, but just forced myself through it by sheer will.
And you ended up in the special forces, or the Australian equivalent of the special forces?
Whilst I did that, I simultaneously trained every single day, running, swimming, and weights, because I didn't know how much to train or what to train. But what I was really good at was pushing myself through like really hard stuff and overtraining, which became a problem later on. But I knew that if I overtrained, it's a better problem to have, you know, than undertraining. Like it would give me extra time and extra clarity of mind to be able to make decisions when others are more fatigued than me against, I wouldn't say competition of, in certain environments, but, in the end, they've only got so many numbers they could fill it. But by comparison, they're trying to catch their breath or whatever, and I'd have time to think about the next task or whatever.
It's interesting because it sounds like you came from a bit of an abusive household as a child. And I mean, people can say what they will, but I think mental abuse is maybe even more detrimental. Bruises heal, but the mental stuff you carry your entire life. I know for a lot of people that are dealing with that kind of childhood, you tend to head down pathways of substance abuse and things like that, or an addiction in general. Would you say that this overachieving became your own kind of addiction?
Yeah, the training and overachieving became an addiction. Definitely. Like, and I'll get to the snowball here. So I started training every single day and studying every single day. But this was fine. I was 17, I was in the military. I wasn't allowed out at night. I wasn't allowed to drink and do all these things. Australia, 18 is the drinking age, right? But it also meant that they would cap you and like have a duty of care. So your social life wasn't there. So like I had all the extra time to do all this. So all the clarity in the mind of the world because I went out partying, but it also killed all my time that I would have otherwise to take girls on dates or do all this socializing. So I had none of that between 17 and 18, like almost zero interaction, actually. It was like they killed that, which, as you're raised with the emotional abuse and touching on that, it's like emotional abuse, as I've learned more about it, is one of the hardest to deal with because people don't have marks or incidents to truly mark its existence. And it took me until 31 and couple of hundred psychoactive therapy hours for them to finally convince me and get me to say, okay, maybe this is a thing. Like she was like, oh, thank God. Like it was crushing her to try to get this across. So yeah, it is a pretty hard one to treat and acknowledge. But again, it's like, all right, accept and understand it, move on with the, what did I get from this? What did it give me? So I learned to train immensely, study immensely, and focus on the task and where I wanted to go and what things I wanted to achieve. To such a degree that I was in, I ended up finishing my electronics school. I was posted to some engineering in the shipyards there for the naval ships, and I went and served on the ships. I went on trips. I was able to enjoy the moment and the journey. But while I was on the ships, I remember being in the Filipino sun, and I would run around the flight deck for like 3 to 4 hours with 50 kilograms and all this equipment and whatnot, and camouflage boots. And I'm in the Navy. I don't have any of this, so I had to get it from the Army. And they just seen me over like training ridiculously. So they gave me all this stuff. And at this point, it's been like 2 years or so, and I haven't stopped training. I've actually elevated the amount of training of which I'm doing to, let's say, to an unnecessary amount. But being in the Navy and to switch over the Army to pursue special operations, I had to put in all that extra gross amount of effort. I just wanted to make sure that, okay, cool, these people are going to know more than me. So how do I just outperform in this area? Gives me space to learn the other stuff. I proceeded to just run laps around the flight deck doing this. And every time I did it, and I do it at least once a week, as well as all the other training I do, I'd fill my boots full of blood because I tore apart my whole feet and off the back of my heel because I just had the wrong size boots. Like no one cared to give me the right size boots. They just gave me whatever equipment they had and I was just going to make it work. So I went through a lot of like layered resilience building there. And then I put in for the Army's selection entry test, I should say. And then I went across to do the entry test after the ship sabotaged me several times because they wasn't in their interest to lose me. It's hard to have electrical engineers, even though they can't do anything about it because it's prioritization of military assets and resources. They can't stop it, but they're like, before a deployment into Asia, they'd be like, oh, we've lost your medical something the day before of the test. They'd be like, we've lost your medical whatever, and they'd be like, oh, I guess you can't go tomorrow. And it wasn't like it was like they knew it was illegal, but they were also kind of like, I can't tell you can't go on, but I just told you can't go on. You can't go do this entry test.
Hmm.
But yeah, eventually I got it myself. I paid for my own flight back from Singapore to be ahead of the ship, and got there and did it. And through my resilience, I came first or second in every category against, I guess, all the army guys without me knowing how to do anything. Now at this point, you've got to remember, I'm not like America where they have the Navy SEALs. So you have this image that the Navy SEALs kind of know how to run around with guns and whatnot. The Navy in America as well, for the most part, have no idea how to do any of that. They don't have camouflage, they have equipment, they don't do any of that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's when that resilience in my life and growing up really tied in here because I was able to just train and overtrain and work and grind and stay focused and push my body through anything. The army, the Navy could yell, they could do whatever they want or whatever, and it just wasn't going to get through to me physically and physically, emotionally, mentally. It was untouchable at this point, and I knew it. And the worst part, worst part, let's look at it like glass half full. I knew that I was like getting so resilient and more resilient. And every time that I did, I got rewarded for that resilience by getting to the next level in my career that I wanted to achieve at a speed that is like really unprecedented. Like at this point, I've already done, I then go across to the army because they're like, it's more of a prioritization of us to have special operations personnel than it is to have another engineer. So you're coming across, and the Navy couldn't do anything about it. So it's like I'm getting rewarded, and I'm already living like these small careers that are someone else's entire life journey in their career, in their work.
As you are excelling in all these places physically, what are you doing with your thoughts? Are they just getting shoved further and further down? Like, I'm not feeling pain, I'm not feeling worry, I'm not being scared, I'm not having any of that.
I must have, I don't know what it was. Like I had a really great grandfather. I had both great grandfathers and grandmothers, right? But my grandfather, the one he got me, in my final year of high school, I was wearing a blazer and a tie and all these things, which happens in Australia to a certain degree. And so I wore that, and he took me along to the recruiting. And he was a very brilliant, remarkable man. He was very extremely well educated, but like self-educated. The family growing up had a lot of money, extreme amount of wealth actually, and then his father gambled it all away. But he never lost his ability to his education that he was raised with. He was able to self-educate. He copped it on the chin. Comes home. We've lost multiple mansions and houses. We've lost any business assets. They had a stake in the first bank in New South Wales, and they established, and they lost that. Lost everything. It's like, oh, by the way, you're going to the mines because you're the eldest, and the family needs any money they can get to
But
support
they
us.
lost it or they gave it away?
Lost it, gambled it all away. His father gambled it all away.
Oh shit.
Came home, had none, and so he just copped on the chin, got sent to the mines the next day to make money for the family.
Whoa. That's a shift.
Yeah, massive shift, but he never lost that, and he was extremely humble. He'll be an unchallengeable mark as a gentleman to ever measure up to. It's not like I was lost without good men in my life, right? My father, this man. So I wasn't all flying blind, right? I had these people that definitely influenced me in a positive way, I should say.
What happens next? You've been accepted into the army. I didn't realize you could go laterally like that between branches.
You're not meant to. It's only because I passed their test, and the head special operations guys were like, we want that guy. We want that kid, whoever that kid is. Because I think I was like 19 at the time, maybe
Yeah.
definitely actually 19 at the time.
Yeah.
So, I'd spent somewhere between 2 to 3 years in the Navy training like hell, probably about 2.5. Haven't stopped every single day.
You're just a baby at 19, so young.
Definitely. But man, I was focused. I didn't think negative about myself. I was able to be self-aware enough of when I was doing good and doing bad. And the thing was, if I put effort into absolutely everything I was doing, I could not be angry at myself if I did not pass. If I didn't put effort into the thing that I was doing and I failed, then I could be down on myself. So I had this really objective way of looking at success and measuring it, the harshness on myself. I couldn't sit there and be like, like it's like, man, you could have sprinted harder. I didn't have that. I sprinted everything. I gave everything into anything and everything that I was doing. So as a result of that, I couldn't, the thoughts, the negative thoughts that might arise from, enduring these past experiences might make that challenging, but they didn't because I was able to objectively measure them. And the military has a lot of benchmarks success to help you objectively measure it. It's the civilian world that might make that more challenging because it's kind of like everything's up in the air in every which direction. They bring me across because they can do that. They have the power to do that. That was more important this time during the war was going on to have special operations personnel. And Australia's a very high bar for their servicemen and their infantry, and as well as their special operations and so on. And they had to because we don't have the numbers America has. And we don't have the technological advancements. Well, we do, but in smaller numbers that the Americans have, which really doesn't give us this drowning in assets scenario that America has, where you have an infinite amount of ships and helicopters and planes and whatnot. But what we do have is this ability to have a extremely overtrained and educated and like personnel to draw from. Look, you guys are great. Like I would like, man, if you want to go to war with anyone, you want to go to war with the Holy Roman Empire, the Americans, they got it.
I get that. No, I get that. I do. But I wish that education was a little bit more emphasized for the non-commissioned,
Yeah. And even then I've seen some American commissions that wouldn't also, I'd be less inclined to follow them into a cinema. But it's not saying all of them. Like for the most part, the people I worked with in the American military, so the operators, the helicopter pilots, all this stuff, I'm absolutely on their team. They were just
I have friends that are, special forces and Marine, all this stuffs, and they are definitely the cream of the crop as far as knowledge and ability and integrity.
Yeah, integrity is the foundation for all of it. So to do that test, I have to have a track record of an entire career with an unquestioned integrity.
Mm.
It cannot be a single moment where they're like, Nick's integrity was in doubt. So I wasn't just doing the right thing. It was if you fucked up, you're owning up to it and you're copying it. It's like, come what may. But it was like his integrity has never been in doubt. And every operator that does this, in order for this teams to work, and it gets a little bit more elevated as you go up higher in responsibilities, as to like how important that is, because you could be operating as a one or two man team, in some sort of theater in the world, right? And you damn well better have especially if you're in a small team, right? Like that other person is relying on you like intensely. So I get to the army and I do this, and they've got me on this path where they're like, all right, well, now you're across here and you've done this test, great. However, you don't have the infantry training and you don't have the training from the general army. So they started training me as fast as they could across all these things. And then they put me in the whole infantry school and I just go through that as fast as I can. And then they have this special operations, like prerequisite sort of course that they do to help you gap the time so that you can learn as much as you can before doing our special forces commandos. We have two special forces. I'll get into that in a bit. We have our commandos, or our like kind of like our Green Berets, right, or Rangers, something like that. And these guys here, they're like, cool, we got a selection and training course that we do together. And basically a training course, and if you're not up to it, they'll cut guys off every day or every week until they will it down to the people that they want. And when I got into the infantry school, I started the day, like week, somewhere in the first week, I got a hernia the size of a golf ball. And it was down in my groin. And so what I would do is I had to jam it in, whatever organ it was. I had to jam it inside of me, my fingers. And I did the next 13 weeks of the infantry course like this, whatever it was, whether it was pack marching, charging, whatever. I would jamming this golf ball organ inside it. It was the most agonizing thing ever, but I was capable of putting myself through anything at this point
Holy
because I could
cow.
do anything. Um, and the other thing was I was very observant and I learned things quickly, which became very important later on for the military. So I was able to suffer this, even though there was a distraction of pain, but I was extremely fit. So I was able to compensate with that and compensate that I was able to learn quick. So my attention, even though as part of it is definitely focused on this a portion, the rest of it is for the most part focused on the task at hand, capable of being there. Well, I come out of surgery, start training again as soon as I can, which hernia means you can't use your upper or lower body because your abdomen doing everything is quite the challenge, right? And I realized I'm behind the other guys who are about to attempt this selection. So not only am I behind the eight ball of knowledge, I'm behind the eight ball of physically, and I'm also extremely fatigued here. Well, eventually the day comes, I get on this course, and I proceed to spend the next 32 days or four, no, it was like this one was about 40, 45 days, something like that, because it was a course and a selection. And I just kept going. I was aware I was struggling in many regards. I was aware mostly with fatigue because I wouldn't quit, didn't know how to quit. But I knew I didn't know things more than the other guys, and I knew I didn't. I knew physically I was kind of holding there. The hernia was its own question, but the fatigue was like I would have to stand up in all the lessons or anything because I couldn't sit down anymore because I'd fall asleep. Like I'd have micro sleeps if I sat down, and I'm talking like within the first 10 seconds of sitting down. So I learned that unless I was permanently going to go to sleep for the next couple of hours, well, they woke you up with some yelling and screaming. So I was back against the wall. So I got a few days just before the end, and they pulled me across at the outside, and I'm out of hundreds of guys, and we're down to like the last 30 guys, and they pulled me across, and they're like, "Look, you don't have enough experience to be here," and I'm like, I. Yeah, I tried to tell you that, guys, when I missed out on that course and I did this surgery, but I'm like, so be it. That was my first like failure.
I don't know if I could call it a failure. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, it was definitely interesting. It was for me, it was a failure. How I handled that was really good because I took it on board. It hurt, it crushed me. It was the first time that it's like I gave it everything and it didn't work out. Even though I'd given it everything, because for the most part before things were working out because I was just putting in every little bit of effort. And usually when you do that, go figure, things usually go your way when you legitimately, hand on your heart, put your hot solid effort in. And I'm like, man, maybe I'm not good enough. So I went through about a couple of days of just general suffering and alone time and all these things. And the first time in my life that I got any real concept of emotional turmoil, and I went through that a bit and had that journey. So then I went to an infantry unit of my choice. They said, you can have any choice you want. Went to the one of my choice, which I knew was a new one. I knew that they would promote me and put me through the ranks much quicker.
so what happens? You get deployed right away, or when was you boots on the ground somewhere where you went, well, this is not a video game?
I then go to this unit. I proceed to, they realize that I'm pretty cluey. So they proceed to promote me quick and have me in charge, put me on reconnaissance courses and all these things so that I'm in charge of a bunch of the team really. And basically I'm actually just going to skip that special forces selection, which was only going to be a place I was going to hang out in that unit for a few years and then do our next special operations unit, which is the SAS. And then I started training 5 to 7 times a day between all my work activities.
The SAS, which is the air service.
So you guys created some SEAL teams to have something like our commandos, and you created special forces to have something similar to that as well. And then you created Delta Force to have something like the British SAS. And then you created out of the SEALs, you took your best SEALs, and then you created something called SEAL Team 6, which was mocked after the British SAS. So it was definitely a step above for me in maturity, the ability to pursue. And I was still, again, this time I just turned 21. So I was like, okay, like you've got your SEALs, as you know, as your Hell Week. Like this is 3 weeks of just rigorous psychological mental torture to just see every weakness in you. And I got injured, but the best thing happened to me for the first time in my career, I rested and had to rest. It was lower back. I couldn't run. I couldn't do upper body. And the day that I knew my lower back was functioning was the day that I decided to pick up my pack to put it on to go to the airport to fly to Perth to do the selection. Anyway, through the sheer will of the gods, I got through. I got selected. They had a like about 370 or something start, and I got down, and there was about 19 of us or something that got selected at the end. Selection, it's famous because the last 5 or 6 days without food and sleep, and you're already broken at that point anyway. Work you to death and harass you to death.
Is part of that breaking down, I get, to sort of cohese you into one functioning machine and not a person, because you can't be a person when you have to look out for all the other people. You have to be functioning as a unit. I get that part, but is it also partially because if, God forbid, someone were to be captured and tortured, they need to know that the people that they've selected can handle that? Or is that just my movies brain going?
That's part of it. They just want to know that it's the most mentally and physically resilient person that has no concept of quitting in any format and can solve. They need to get you to a broken point, completely broken. They've tested you as in masses for different things, right? They've got hundreds of guys at the start, so testing you for quitting, testing you for integrity, testing you against things they'll teach you. You won't sleep for a few days, then they'll test you on them several days later. They're testing how you handle high stress scenarios, how you test like interrogations, all these things. And that happens for weeks until the last. Then like 12 days from the end, they'll send you out into the mountains for 5 days to navigate, and every day you'll walk it's like 30 kilometers. God knows what that is in miles. And then
Nobody knows.
No one will ever know. 30 kilometers, and then you'll also climb a mountain as well. But at this point, your legs don't work. You've got injuries. You're missing part of your feet. We lost like 33, 34 pounds each just on this 3 weeks. And we didn't have it to lose. We're very athletic guys, like going for this thing of their life, something very important to them. So we all look like sick, starved dogs, or from a war, like prisoner of war camp. Then they throw into 6 days of like every day you're carrying things like heavier than your body weight for 12 hours a day. And then you're building and solving problems to see if you can lead a team under stress, see if you can, everyone's a leader. So everyone has to be able to lead the teams. And it's like, and seeing if you can remember and solve problems and whatnot. And then the whole night they'll keep you up in this like mock village where they've got you digging a swimming pool for the chief while being harassed with a knife. You're just sitting there, and then you don't eat. You don't eat, and you definitely don't sleep. Like there's no, that's where you're going to sleep. There's none of that. You're 6 days, you're not sleeping. So you're pretty losing it a bit by the end. There is one meal, 2 days before the end. It's not really a meal. It's more of just to test your resolve. They bring out this green stew that's cold, and it's brains and different organs that are riddled with maggots. So they left it out until the flies went through it, left maggots in it, and it's like off meat with maggots through it, and it's cold, and you're just expected to eat as much of the maggots and the brain and whatever as you possibly can to show that you can do it in those circumstances. But you're starving, so you'll eat anything at this point, and you get a bit of that, and then they just take it from you. So you don't get a meal. They just want to know that you'll do it, and then they pull it from you. So it's like you're just trying to eat handfuls of maggots and anything you can in any format just to get any nourishment into you.
I feel like maggots, I get that's protein, but eating some brain, I don't know if I'd do
The maggots were fine, actually. The brain was pretty rancid.
It's the brain that freaks me out.
They got it wrong too. So the cooks didn't get it right because no one's cooking this very often, and they wanted it not really cooked for us. They got it wrong, so it actually gave everyone basically low-level dysentery. So it was it was a mess thereafter. No pun intended.
Yeah. So good Lord.
Yeah. Anyway, and then at the end of that, we got to the end, and no one had been told if they were selected or not from the remainder of guys that had finished. There was only 20-something guys that finished it. We still had to see if we were actually going to be selected to start the 18 months training cycle. So instead of ending it there and getting us medical attention and all this stuff, they were like, the guy running it wanted to see if he could outdo all the other instructors from every other year and make it even harder. So he threw us straight into 96 hours of resistance to interrogation, which is another 96 hours of no sleep with the same song on, blindfolded, shivering in the cold on a mat.
Do you remember the song?
Yeah, it was White Stripes, something from White Stripes. I don't want to hear it. It gave us, we all had post-night terrors and all this shit. We're all yeah, but by 10 days after this, like it was clearly they said they'd never do it again because we're already pretty broken it turned out to be torture. There's a Commonwealth investigation into it for torture. It definitely broke the lines. Those days there, that one song on repeat, so awful that like we just couldn't hear it. None of our guys can hear it. Like it's like it'll set us off pretty quick. But then afterwards, we were having like full blown night terrors. Like
Jesus.
everyone was like we're all like everyone peeing in the bed. No one had bowel control anymore. Like it's like waking up screaming. Night. It was like we they definitely broken the lines of, and they're like, cool guys, we know where the line is now. It's like, hey guys, this is it. This is the line. You don't want to go past this point here. So help me God. Um, so now, yeah, now the military knows that, and it's probably you guys might be able to benefit off that too. Australians tested it out on their own.
Abu Dhabi, they use that to torture prisoners,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they use the same thing. So and they're practicing and refining their techniques of the intelligence on us. So it's like, okay, fuck guys, thanks for playing, but we didn't quit. No one quit. We just copped it, and at the end of us, we got broken out. Like our commanding officer of the unit we're going into, this dude is just like badass, came and did it, and just let's not waste an opportunity to do a really good training. So they had us set up in this location, and at the end of it, they go, cool, we're going to put you to sleep in line with the Geneva Convention, which means they could be like, oh, we're going to give you 10 minutes sleep, but they put us in there, and as soon as they laid us down, like we blacked out, right? Like 10 days without sleep, we black out, like our bodies don't move anymore. And like we're in the spirit world of dreaming and over saved up REM. And anyway, him and this entire, one of the squadrons, one of the fractions of the unit turned it into a whole mission where they set targets up everywhere throughout an entire city. And we're just shooting and blowing in walls and doing all this stuff to like set up an entire hostage rescue scenario so that they could actually practice with what it would be like live hostages that have been in this scenario, kind of like what Israel's going through at the moment, right? When they came in to get us, they'd never done it with these kind of hostages before. So they realized we couldn't actually use our legs anymore. So they had to get these, 18 or 17 guys or whatever it was and drag them and carry them while shooting. So it's like, which is part of the 18 months training. Guys have to be able to pick up a grown man with equipment on and carry him himself whilst he does his job and run with us. And like they had to do a full mission profile. Anyway, and at the end of it, we get this speech by this guy that I can't remember, but I will remember that moment for the rest of my life. Like this commanding officer was like a guy that you would follow into the gates of hell. You'd be like, I'm happy to storm hell with this dude.
Wow. That's that's also wild. Well, okay, let's truncate a little bit.
Yeah.
You're a movie, you're several movies, I think. Yeah. Tell me about, so you do 3 combat tours in Afghanistan. You end up with PTSD, TBI, fibromyalgia. I read all the different ailments that were understandably, I mean, one could argue that those things were building all along. I can't even imagine 10 days without sleep, what that does to the brain, first of all. And that was just one instance.
100%. Great observation. That's for sure. So I finished that 18 months training. I get into the unit, which is a significant deal for me as a young man. I'm like now 23, just turned 23. And then they're like, hey, we need some guys to go to Afghan for a kill capture combat deployment over this period. Nick, you haven't been, because I'm young and I've been busy in training this whole time. And they're like, so you want to go? I'm like, yeah, 100%. Like I'm frothing to go. I'm like, it would be a fight amongst us to get deployed. Like we love doing our job. So the more we're sitting over there, like my first trip, I didn't want to come back. I'm like, just leave me here, permanent deployment till they shut this country down. And overzealous in some ways, but we'll pay for that later. So then I proceed to do that one.
That was what their job was, though, right? To create a super soldier.
Yeah, we went. We were pretty hungry for it. They did that, and they trained us disproportionately competent to our enemies, like immensely. So we did that. The other thing we were doing that the Americans stopped doing or didn't do was we were doing day missions. So we worked out, through using combat assault dogs, we'd have these dogs. We'd do missions where we'd have dogs running around and helping us clear cornfields and kind of being our eyes and ears in many ways.
The Malinois?
Yeah, the Malinois. We didn't let it. I had one on my 3rd deployment, so I didn't. We didn't let the Taliban gain refuge, their commanders in any format. Like for often they'd be like, oh, if they're going to come, they're going to come at night. Like, hell no, we would come in day and night to come ruin your good time. We did not give a shit, which meant that we were working round clock day and night, which meant that day and night were completely on the table. Like we come back from like 3 days of no sleep with training, right, to prep for that. And then we'd be like, shit, this other guy's popped up. All right, change gear, bomb up more ammunition. Let's go again. And we just roll out again. And so for 4 month stints, we were just doing that. So I did 4 months, came back, and at this point I was pretty tired. Came back, but I positioned myself so that I'd come back and do a course called JTAC course. Now, this is a whole other person's job in the military, to be just good at coordinating and deconflicting aircraft on the battlefield, to drop bombs on the enemy, not on your own guys, not on civilians, and know how to deconflict the aerospace. Well, we would do that so we could do that in combat on the ground simultaneously as well. I'm like, yep, I want to do that, because I knew if I did that, it would make me more employable for people to be like, Nick, we want you on our team to go on the next trip. It was like strategic, and it worked. I did my first 4 months. I came back, went straight into that course instead of taking leave off. Did that, got to the point where I was just like, I was exhausted, right? And then this is where decompression comes in. You could say all that stuff in my life prior has caught up with me. So then I'm like, all right, now I still haven't decompressed from what I just gone through, right? Like, as in combat, killed my first man on day 4, and then the combat just kept going after that. So it was like pretty intense, you could say. And then the decompression looked an awful lot like me flying out of Australia with 2 mates from the unit, going to LA for like 6 days, going to Vegas for like 7 days, going to San Diego and back to LA, and drinking drinking every day. Like, it was like the decompression was that. And it was, there was starting to be a few rocky elements there that you're like, right, things aren't that great, but this will blow over.
Yeah, decompression equals self-medication, really.
Yeah. And I proceeded to go straight back into Afghanistan for fighting season this time, which is somehow even busier. And that there was definitely busy, and did that for 4 months. And at the end of that, I was like, all right, I haven't taken leave pretty much my entire career at this point, voluntarily in any capacity. So I had all this leave and time saved up. So I took about 10 weeks, had an actual decompression where I just forgot that I was a soldier with my brother and 2 dear civilian friends, and traveled around from, we arrived in Miami, went through the South of America a little bit, and then went to all South America, hung out there, came back, got a dog, got trained up on how to do the dog. So now I'm doing it my entire extremely complex job as an operator, plus JTAC, coordinating aircraft, plus dog handling. I definitely bitten off more responsibilities than anyone actually needs to bite off. It's fine. It's part of the bearing of emotions. I'm not interested in developing a relationship. I have the extra time. So,
well, you have to have a relationship with your dog, obviously.
We had to bond with the dog. A lot of work. Yeah. A lot of work. Went to deploy with him. And then the third one was where I probably saw some of the shit that I wished I didn't see as much, and it caught up with me at that point. So at the end of that one.
You mean human suffering?
Yeah, some death. It definitely seen it in every other one. It was just some of the memories from that one seemed to live on a little bit more than the other deployments. Sure. Right? Like it was more collateral, and it was just like civilians, kids, shit like that. It was like, fuck my life in that regard.
The thing that is always strikes me is, for any military person that I speak with, is that it's clear that the military creates a person, or sort of almost an absence of person, in order to rewire our golden rule understanding that's just inherent of morality, of being a person on the planet. They have to restructure that in your mind and create someone that kills, but kills in a just, quote unquote, way.
Yeah.
But we all know that that's not what war looks like.
It looks like chaos. It's like, it looks like it's not a Michael Bay movie where everything's just perfectly organized, systems and technology, like targeting exact everything. Like, so those, and any of the collateral that I saw, it wasn't myself. And that's when it became the hardest, when it's like, it's like kind of like an enemy fault. but you're still dealing with the consequences of what they did, and that's when it's kind of creates this frustration.
Yeah. I mean, they use children as bombs.
Yeah, in Iraq, and there was just his father used he had like a Anyway, I
Yeah.
won't go.
You don't have to talk about it. No, it's okay. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's so, and then at the end of that, I came back, and I'm like, and I like on that third trip, like I also taught myself Spanish. I was training a dog. I was doing missions constantly. I was training at the gym 2 to 3 times a day. I was commanding aircraft in the command center because we didn't trust anyone else to command as diligently as our guys if we were available, because we're like, who's going to fix the location of these guys better than us? So we'd be coordinating multiple drones and aircraft in the air whilst working with our team, so that when I got on the ground, I could be like, I've been coordinating that aircraft and I've been seeing him dig a hole in that position every fucking night and going out and touching it. Do not go there. Not everyone's like a leader in this organization at like a round table of some capacity. But I could stand there in front of everyone and be like, do not go near that. I've been watching this guy for the last several nights. Go out there to whatever the hell is being dug there and do something every night. And usually they set like booby traps, let's not say booby traps, ID with a plate that sets it off, so that if anyone does come at night, because they're expecting, for the most part, US and British or whoever, but the Australians will go on the day. But if we did do a night mission, because we think it's, because that's the opportunity, it would be like, don't go there, find another way in, because that looks dodgy as hell. But I was doing all my job, all the training, all the missions, all the athleticism required. The dog energy users, because they run so much, you've got to run with them.
They're brilliant dogs.
They're brilliant, but they get so much energy. I used to take him to the treadmill, and he'd run an hour and a half on the treadmill, elevated, or like we'd run around we'd go in full gear together. His little entire strapped chest with his camera and stuff. He'd put a muzzle on. I'd put a mask on, and we'd run around everything. We just do a lap of the airfields in the sun, just so I could like try to kill some of his energy. So I was burnt out. I get to the end of it. I'm emotionally and physically burnt out. This is where I'm starting to realize that I've got my tether, where I can run out of energy in many regards. And I finished that last deployment, and then all of a sudden I start feeling tired. But instead of having time off, they throw us straight into some counterterrorism training to get us up to speed with a handover to take counterterrorism and just hold that down domestically for the most part. Well, that's when I, my energy and my persistence of this was just started to take a huge hit of fatigue. Like I'm pretty damn shattered, guys. I've just done 3 of these trips in 2 years and all this training and everything else in between, and like, all this other anti-terrorism stuff. And it was just like, guys, and also with deployments to Asia and all these other things. I'm like, I'm pretty wrecked, and like, no one cares, which they don't, which is fine. I did it. And at the end of it, I remember this day on the last night that I started walking towards a vehicle to go home. And I'm the last guy to leave most of the time because I've got the dog. I've got to take care of everything else. And I've now also got to take care of another half a human being and make sure he's fed and he's good. And I start walking towards the car, and it's like, the car is only like 200 yards away, max 250. And as I start getting closer to it, and I'm probably only 100, I just start breaking down crying. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like my energy, my fatigue, everything had just burst at this point. It's like I'm just walking and like stumbling along, just trying to hold it together. And I'm like, and that's when I was like, oh man, I might be pretty tired here. I'm not doing too good. I think I might need to rest. So then I'm like, okay, I cashed in all my holidays and leave and everything saved up. And in a few months, I planned it so that I would I'd leave the country, and I'd have like 10.5 months out of the unit. Like, because in Australia, you don't get bonuses and stuff for staying around longer. What you do is they give you 3 months long leave if you've spent 10 years serving. Got in young. So at this point, I'm like, about 27, and I'd been in for the 10 years.
And never really taken a break.
Never taken a break. Like you'd have to make me. So I took this, and as I started going towards that, I started encountering, I went to a doctor and I was like, feel like really tired at the core. Like I just like, not a fatigue anymore. And he's like, oh, it's chronic fatigue syndrome. So I'm like, okay, what do you do? He's like, just rest. I'm like, all right, well, I've got time off coming up, so I guess I'll just rest. Anyway, I took the time off and I went to some Europe for a bit and I settled mostly in Miami and down there on the beach and just hanging out and chilling and not really focusing too much on the military stuff and resting. But what happened was I started getting the fatigue started turning into like anxiousness. And then I started turning into like I couldn't sit in a cinema anymore. I remember watching the movie The American Sniper, and I couldn't sit in the front. I wanted to leave. I was rocking. I was shaking. That's what started first was the anxiety around it. That became a thing and became really really difficult to deal with. And then the fatigue didn't go away. And then after that period of time, I went back. What happened was I'd met a girl. I started dating a girl, and I had my first relationship.
That must have been interesting too, because you didn't really have all the socialization skills that happen throughout the first 10, 15 years of dating.
Let's say I had the ability to court a girl, I was living a rock star life of some kind and completely unattached. And I had that element, but I didn't have any relationship building skills, and I'd never seen a healthy relationship as such. However, when I was in Miami, I had two dear friends of mine who were like probably 20 years older than me, and he was a mate and his wife, and they were awesome, and we would always hang out and go on adventures together. He's like a very extremely successful guy, but just also really grounded and spiritual and collected, and has five kids, five like just beautiful, healthy kids. Like apples don't fall far from the tree, right? So it really gave me kind of like this person I could model something like that off. Ended up getting this girl in my life, and she's adorable. She's a great girl, right? But the tough part is, for the first time in my life, I'm now learning how to use emotions, and I'm also starting to stampede towards PTSD and going through all those psychological chaos to get there.
Did any part of you recognize it because of your dad? Did you have any kind of, because you were so young, I guess you wouldn't have.
Yeah, no idea. It became like this beautiful artwork of chaos of me trying to work out, like I'm not crazy. I'm not like a person screaming in the streets. It's not my vibe, right? But when I lose it, it's like really trying to understand why my mind, like I started sleeping like 19 hours a day in the purely deep sleep. There's no REM, there's no light sleep. Like I lay down, I am out. My body doesn't know any of the other factors. I'll be in a car with her, and then I'll just start breaking down crying, and she doesn't know what the hell's going on, and she's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't know. I have no idea what's happening." And eventually, this happened over the next. Went back to the unit, and this kind of happened over the next year as I was trying to hide it, and almost got deployed for the whole ISIS thing, and a few other things, and it was and I was trying to make it all work so I could do this job, and the job kind of distracted me enough, but. At this point, I got diagnosed with a chronic fatigue again. Then I got fibromyalgia, and then I eventually, had this psychiatrist that I had to see, and it was getting to the point of the full-blown PTSD scenario, right? But I let it get to a point due to my resilience, which is now no longer a superpower. At this point in my life, it's starting to become not a superpower. I let it get to a point where I had a full-blown. Like I couldn't drive in a straight line anymore. I couldn't remember names. I couldn't remember long distance thing, long memory, medium memory. Everything was foggy. It was like
All the trauma was coming to a head, basically,
yeah, it was getting pretty heavy at this point.
flooding your brain.
I proceed to start. I'm breaking down crying 15 times a day. While I'm in there, I'm like, I'm going to do this job because no one is going to watch. No one's going to go to war. No one's going to watch my buddy's back better than me. No one is as good. No one identifies that pressure plate. No one remembers this. Like we cleared this village that last time my squadron went there, they killed 81 dudes. So we go back to clear it, and I'm like, there is a small, tiny tree line there that you guys missed, and I'm like, and I think someone should go back and clear it. And it's like they go back and clear it. There's two Taliban laying there in ambush. Right? They would have killed like 4 or 5 guys, or maybe even shot up the helicopter on the way out. So it's like. The little details that I remember and know about the things that I added to keep guys alive. I'm like, no one will watch them better than me. No one. So it's like I do it until I'm at breaking point and can no longer do it. And that's what I did.
Were you still with the girlfriend at this time? Was she able to handle that?
No, that had separated several months before, where it kind of came to a head where it was just like, I'm like, I can't keep myself alive and do this. And she like,
Did your CO notice stuff?
No, no one noticed. I kept it so hidden.
Wow.
Kept it so hidden until I had to just walk into the office of my commanding officer and be like, "Hey, I'm really not good." And even then doing that, it's like he could see it in my face at that point. He's like, "Holy shit, yeah, okay, fuck." No one's been taking the time to look at you. Like, and they deliberately, we do that for each other in a sense that it's like the guys will help each other medically stay in the unit as long as they can.
I
Whether
get
it's
that. Yeah.
physical injuries, whether it's for whatever, it's like if you can keep up and do the job, no matter how much pain you're in or what's going on,
Yep.
we'll fucking hold it down for you.
We'll duct tape your whole life so you can keep going.
Duct tape, glue, and sticky tape solves everything. So I did that, and then they were like, then he went to his next senior commander, and they both had a chat. And they're like, "Holy fuck, this is not good." So they're like, "Go home, don't drive." They're like, "Do not drive, walk home." And this is the thing: I was almost dying in car accidents. I lived like right on the edge of base, so to drive to work was like maximum 4 minutes, and I was almost dying in several car accidents on the way to base. And my subconscious wanted me dead, so it wanted me to steer into oncoming traffic. It wanted to steer into trees and whatever. So I'd catch myself coming out of these daydreams like consciously, and I'm aiming at a tree or what. It was getting pretty dicey with against my own subconscious, right?
Yeah. Do you think that that moment was, or that realization was the subconscious was like, dude, the only way we're going to get you to get a good night's sleep is to kill you?
Yeah,
I mean,
we're
is that kind
tired.
of where it was?
We're tired, man. We're fucking tired. We're hanging in here. I I don't know. I think it's like it was a boiling point, as you alluded to before, where all my childhood and everything until this point had finally kind of caught up with me of doubling down. Here's a result. As a result of me going and talking to these commanders, and rightfully so, but sadly so, in that one moment, I just lost my identity, lost who I am, lost my mission in this world, which to a man is the most important thing to him. And I'd lost my career. I will never be that. I'll never be the operator again. This guy that I worked my ass off to be and to stay as. I will never be able to go to war and cover these guys back and do this journey of life. And I've just destroyed my entire career in one conversation of going into that office and speaking up that something
But you
wasn't right.
saved your own life.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's where that other layer of courage was.
Did these people step up for you? I mean, it sounds like they did.
Yeah.
I know that for you, it's like, shit, my whole world is crumbling. But to know that they saw, they love you. I mean, it was important for them to protect you.
Yeah, no, like everyone that encountered it handled it well, and took care of it, and was there. It was not a problem. It was more of just my internal world was destroyed and very challenging. Fuck it all. What's important now? What's important later? Right. What's important now is I need to go to a hospital, the unit put on, and go every day. I have to turn up there and do like this 6 to 8 hours of trauma recovery because I'm on the close of death. Like at this point, I'm just trying to stop myself dying. So I take antidepressants, start them. I start going to this clinic. I start doing psychoactive therapy in private as well as in with other veterans. And it was like something out of a movie, but it was real. It was real. It was where I started understanding my past, my present, the mental side of it, really getting some tools in there so I was able to stem what I would call it triage, which is West is really good at, right? Like medical triage, and I'd say mental. Outside of that, not really that good. Just really handling the immediate chaos of an emergency where we nail that. Like if you ask me what doctor I want for mental or physical, I want Western doctors for that. But after that, it doesn't really serve its purpose. It's triage medicine. It becomes irrelevant, right? Almost entirely. I was able to have a catch up with the psychologist who took me through that. I was able to catch up with her like 2 or 3 days ago, and she had a good emotional. We both had an emotional moment where I thanked her, to be grateful for her keeping me alive. My journey didn't just stop there of healing. This was like I finished that, and now I'm like my body's exhausted. I'm like tired. So then I leave the military, and I'm like I want to get away from Australia. I want to get away from all of this. I want to be somewhere completely different, and I just want to walk away from this life for a while. So I went to Colombia, And I taught myself Spanish on my last deployment to Afghanistan. How to read and write at least, like, Spanish. My ability to speak it wasn't great, but I could talk to you. I could read and write to you all day in Spanish.
Mhm.
So I went there and I started this new life and I took some time slow and just kind of chilled out. But I started realizing that, man, I get sick really easy and all the time. And it was this realization over the next probably 2 years, and I'm like, all right, I've spent, like, out of the last 12 months, like 10 months of it pretty sick in some capacity, and the other 2 months I'm pretty just exhausted. At this point, I'm realizing that there's a whole bunch of, still psychologically, I've got work to do, getting my life together, getting a new path and a new alignment, completely incapable of dating. Like, nor am I interested, because it's just like, I'm just, who gives a fuck? I'm just trying to keep myself together at this point. I spiritually and emotionally, there's a void there that I'm starting to discover more of. I guess the emotional, I'm definitely in the thick of it, but don't understand any of it. And the spiritual is starting to appear its head a little bit. And then I hang out. So I hang out in Columbus for 2 years before I find out I'm just not sick. Like, I've got a bacterial or viral infection or something. I had a lung infection for a year and a half. I had constantly with a sickness and permanently fatigued and sleeping and whatnot. I'm like, all right, I've got to. Ended up getting some, after talking to a lot of doctors who, they'll say things like, oh yeah, it's in your head. As soon as they find out you've had any mental health past and you try to talk to them about chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or whatnot, it's in your head.
Trust me, they do that with women all the time too.
Oh, really? Yeah, poor guys. Poor guy. Yeah, you guys getting crushed. We're all getting crushed out there by Western medicine. And so what I did was I was like, I really don't think it is. Like, I'm pretty good at the nuance of these things now, and I'm extremely self-aware. I eventually found a doctor in Australia through the help of a dear friend of mine, a guy who I still work with, by the way. He just treated my mother and helped my mother. I paid for him to take care of my mother, and because I want as many years out of her as I possibly can, right, to orientate her diet. But he was like, Nick, firstly, it's not in your head. It's this, and this. All these tests here have indicated that you have these viruses active in your system from the jungles. You have dengue fever, you have Epstein-Barr, you have Ross River fever, which is Australia's malaria. You have several others that they don't have names for. They're so random and rare. And he goes, so you have all these viruses that can't go dormant because they're all active in your system. And he goes, you're on your way to autoimmunity. And he's like, you need to leave. You need to be in the sun every day. You need to be on ground level. And he's like, and you need to be, you need to move cities essentially and be here. So I moved and went to Brazil and stayed by a beach there. And I know that might sound romantic, but at this point, every day is pretty much hell, trying to hold it together.
I mean, they used to tell people with tuberculosis to go to the sun. I get it. You got to go where your body is going to heal.
Yeah, yeah. And it was, so I go down there and I start, getting into this. Now, you got to remember, when I got out, like, I'd still find work and pursuit of my time, right? So it was like a challenge for that. So I actually found myself consulting in the family office space just because I knew a lot of people everywhere. And just, that was a very interesting journey with a lot of really interesting relationships that I still have today that I came across. That was great. But it got to a point after a couple of years and it's like, I can't actually do this anymore. I'm now my full-time job of not dying again. Or my eventually I got completely into autoimmunity. It wasn't just fibromyalgia anymore with intermittent. It was like full-blown autoimmune. But also trying to hold my mind together, and I'm trying to hold this emotional world together. Now I'm just trying to not die from autoimmunity. So it was like trying to do that now with my arms and legs tied in a swimming pool. So it's like, it was a nightmare to do that, but I was doing my best. But the interesting thing was, I went and there's a guy named Jesse Gould by Heroic Hearts Project. He launched he really drove psychedelics and ayahuasca in the veteran space, and he's been in the New York Times and National Geographic, and he's a great guy, remarkable guy. He's spoken in front of Congress. He's worked with MAPS to get a lot of these psychedelics with a SEAL congressman and veteran congressman through Congress, so that it's accessible to have psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, all these sort of things accessible to veterans. And God bless him. And he put me on with a bunch of other vets. Put me on my first ayahuasca retreat. I had this gap where for like a few weeks, my health had stabilized, because before, around that, I was like, I can't do this, because if I send it if I knowingly send it into an area that's going to fatigue it, I'm going to set myself up for an even bigger life failure. But I managed to get like a few days in there and did it. And that was, that was life changing. That's when I realized there was some soul or spiritual work that I had to do as well in some capacity. I'm like, this is a whole new sphere here. But it's again, I'm doing self triage. I'm like, what's important now? What's important later? My mind is kind of pretty well held together. My health is in shambles. Physiologically, I'm dying. I'm like, okay, I also have all these injuries from the military, right? Like broken right leg, foot, ankle, worn through both my kneecaps, left inguinal hernia. I've got my lower back seizures up, my neck, I've worn through both my shoulders, dental damage, hearing loss, TBI, all these things. But it's like, still I'm playing this game of what's important now, what's important later, with life and responsibility to generate some income or manage investment or anything like that that can just keep me going, whilst fighting off the major one at the present, which is the physiological, right? So I come out of this state of like euphoria and understanding and self-awareness and whatnot from the ayahuasca. And that was great for the next few weeks. But I immediately went back in. All right, cool. Body's like, well, sweet, but we're going to keep going back into this trajectory downhill of like catastrophic health failure. But it was good to just put a pin in that and be like, I need to come back here to this world and this energy and this space to do work on myself when the time is right. So eventually I get to a point where my health is so bad, I pass through Colombia again, and it's serendipitously a mate of mine is like, I need you, Nick, given your situation, to just meet this guy at this social party tonight. I'm like, dude, I can barely talk anymore. I can't go out at night. I can't drink. I can't do any of that. I can't like I don't dude, I don't physically have the energy to do these things. My body, like if you understood how miserably exhausting this is at this point, like I don't know what the hell to describe this, but he's like, just do it for me. It's a doctor. You should meet this guy. Met him, owns a clinic, stem cell clinic in Colombia. So I talked to him and I talked to a few other people at the party. He's like, I can't guarantee anything with what you've got going on, but he's like, but I can, fuck man, I can try. And like put me in touch with his head medical officer. And she's like, look, Nick, she goes, I can't guarantee anything, obviously. It's stem cells. It's still very much experimental medicine at this time, but the ultra rich were doing it, and the most successful sports players and UFC fighters and all these guys were doing it. So like, I doubt there was, it was completely invalid. And I listened to enough podcasts. She's like, Nick, I can't. You're so far in the hole. I don't know if we can save you in time, which became pretty daunting. That was kind of like no doctor had said that to me yet. That like you're dying, which became I didn't think about at the time as much, but it became pretty confronting a little bit later. I was like, I'm actually so unself-aware due to my ability to block out emotions and physical pain that I'm the opposite of a hypochondriac, and I actually haven't reacted sufficiently in time to save my own life potentially. Yeah.
That's a huge deal, and it's a big awareness to have for somebody to finally look you right in the eye and say, if you don't do this, at least try, you're fucked.
Yeah. It was like, well, she didn't sell it to me at all. She's like, we're going to help you. We're really going to try to help you. We can't guarantee anything. We just want to say that. But I can tell you that I've had 100% success with every single patient that's come in here with autoimmunity in our clinic. And I'm like, well, that's pretty good fucking odds. And I'm dying anyway, so take whatever money. It just like, it was definitely very expensive. It was like a last ditch effort not to die. But, best deal I've ever made in my life, because the next 2 to 3 months it was getting worse. And I was like, at this point, I could barely leave the house each day. I couldn't have conversations with my family or friends or anyone because I didn't have energy to even have a phone call. I'd shake in my sleep permanently, so I could take sleeping tablets and I'd still be awake because I'd just be shaking. You could see the parasites around my eyes. My eyes twitched from the nervous system and completely shut down.
They didn't give you something to kill off the parasites?
So here's the thing, that I got to a doctor and they gave me what do you call it?
Antibiotic?
Antibiotics, Jesus Christ. I'm struggling with that one. Kind of begged with the doctor. I'm like, these make me really bad. Like I'm like when I go on any of these, they like really set me back. They do disastrous things. He's like, you're gonna have to kill this type of parasite. Now, this doctor wasn't bad. He's one of the world leaders as microbiologists, so I kind of had to trust him. But it was also like, hey, the cure to I don't know, the cure to your sadness is drinking alcohol. You're like, that was kind of like what it was. It was like,
It's like
fuck.
chemo. You have to almost kill someone to kill the
Yeah,
cancer.
yeah, right. It just got to the point where it was really starting to get very hopeless. And my diary, which I mentioned to you before we started here, that I didn't stop journaling and I didn't stop studying languages every day and I didn't give up hope. Like I'd managed to teach myself, I know about 5 languages now. I managed to teach myself some languages. I managed to journal every day, to be self-aware, to read, to better myself, do everything I could because I was able to push through. At this point, I was aware that I'm like, all right, I can't exercise that much. I can't, and I do whatever I can, and I was trying to, but it was like, I didn't give up hope. But if you go back to my journals, they're like what I'd unfortunately, but fortunately, been able to learn was there was a complete difference between depression as a disease of the mind and misery. And I was able to delineate between the two misery based on circumstantial misery and depression based as a sickness. And unfortunately, I was able to live through the both of them and I can identify them very simply. And I was miserable. I was in truest, deepest form of misery of waking up every day, kind of regretting that I wake up. And I remember just writing in there, I'm like, I hope to God that one day I don't just exist for the sake of existing. And I was like, I just very aware of my misery, the way I would journal and process, and I'd give myself 3 things to be grateful for every day. I'd give myself a joy, and I'd work through this journaling system just to hang on to life, just in some capacity, right? Um, Went through a lot of Marcus Aurelius
Hmm.
at this time as well. Every day I'd have like a bit of a quote or something that I'd focus on from him, and man, yeah, I was in hell. I was in a stage of hell. But then the stem cells, like clockwork, they kicked in. Oh my God, they kicked in. And I started healing and getting better. And then from there, I started feeling stable. Not, I wasn't even hoping to get better. I was just hoping to not die anymore.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to. I'd had this feeling before a few times and then life had pulled the rug from underneath me. And then I started getting better from beyond that and kept getting better. And then I went in for my next round of stem cells just before COVID shut everything down. Like literally 4 or 5 days, or like I did them on the Thursday or Friday, and they shut everything down on Monday, but the whole world was closing down. And I got the second round of 3 in time. And I'm like, and then when I got that, I'm like, I'm still going up. And then for the months afterwards, I'm like, I'm still inclining. And for me, if you got me back to 40% of health, that was a deal. That's the best deal that anyone's ever given me. And then I kept going until I got to like, about I was able to, during COVID, take just after a while, I was like, well, your COVID experiences, whatever, but I'm the kind of person that's like, I'm going to die on my feet rather than on my knees. So it's like, so for me, I just chose countries that were by the beach, like Greece, and just
Hmm.
hung out there during COVID by a beach on an island somewhere, and just found my peace with the world. Read a book, laid in a hammock. As a result of that, I came out of all of it at about 70% at the end of COVID. And I was like, my God. And I've still continued to incline because I got my immunity back in my health, as well as learning what else I can do to help my health, which probably goes into the next part of how the body and the mind is so intricately connected, and also emotionally, spiritually, all these other elements. Where I then went, okay, now I've got my mental is stable because my physical's not making it me miserable. And I've done the mental health work. So my mind, I don't have the depression, all that stuff this time. And I'm like, what's the next realm? Next realm is saving my heart, my soul, my emotions, all that whole aspect of me that I've done an entire life of ignoring to bring myself to some sort of holistic health status. Just work at the next peer. And yeah, and then that's what I did.
Wow, I mean that's a hell of a journey. And you're still on the journey, obviously. It's going to be a lifetime that you keep working toward it. But your health is back now?
Yeah, so my health got back. I then proceeded to go on this journey of picking up business and developing in Colombia buildings. And I built a foundation for veterans to try to spread the word about the stem cell stuff.
Warrior Refit, is that what that is?
Yeah, and then I stepped into probably 50 to 60 ceremonies of ayahuasca with really disciplined, intensive work around it to follow that up with integration and everything. I've done most of the medicines that are available, whether it be peyote ceremonies, whether it be bufo, combo, the venom,
Frog. Yeah.
the frog. I've meditation. And in this, I've managed to open my heart, which I thought was a throwaway line. I had this battle showdown one day with myself and ayahuasca. I'm like, I will open my heart today or die. So be it. Come what may. Um, and I managed to open my heart. I'm able to fall in love with myself. I was able to understand and really connect with the feminine and God, have a conversation with God and the presence of God, and understand the plight of the feminine and the challenges in the world. And then also understand, like, then like months later, I went down the masculine journey and responsibility and stepping into that. And that was its whole journey. I found a connection to God that I never had. Like, I'd had every reason in the world to be like, you couldn't convince me God exists. Like, why try? Not that I've necessarily chosen a religion to go down the line of, but I've almost completed reading the whole Bible. I'm about 40 pages or something from the end.
Interesting read.
It is a very interesting read. I tell you what, it's a lot going on in there.
There's a lot going on in there.
Um, but yeah, I really stepped into that and then did a whole bunch of investment into myself for self-development in every other aspect to understand different parts of my life. And I've like left nothing unturned in that development. The last part that I'm covering about the emotional, spiritual side is to me far more interesting than everything else. I have done more work there than I can possibly even try to comprehend, which is allow me to understand every tier of spectrum of emotion and like any of any of that space to me is like really easy to recognize the emotion and understand and connect with it and process it, and relationships and what I'm looking for becomes much easier to process in many ways when choosing relationships, and able to keep things so extremely healthy on that front. Understand my past, self-awareness of my entire trajectory, self-awareness of like with relationships, stepping into responsibility for the business that I create, and what I do in this world. Like I overhauled everything in my life, that I won't touch anything unless it's associated with passion and service. You just can't pay me enough. I just rather like I'd rather live in a jungle. And as a result of that, it's far more rewarding in every capacity to provide a service to another person, or do something that's passionate, or both, that likes the passion in you, or both. That has been the most beautiful part of the journey that I'm looking forward to.
When you said I learned how to love myself, that was the moment, right? Then you realize that everything that's the only reason we're here, right? The bottom line is love. If I believe in something bigger than myself, and I believe that we're all put here in order to figure out remember how to love ourselves and how to love others.
Mm.
And that compassion has to be flowing into oneself in order for us to have the compassion for the rest of the world. And you, honestly, that whole journey you went on, all those fires, you wouldn't be able to now operate in the world with such great compassion and with such integrity if you hadn't experienced those fires. All the way back to little you, who felt like shit when your stepdad was being a jerk, that in some place he was trying to make you forget who you are. And then
Yeah.
in that moment of you sort of waking up and saying, oh, I love myself. That remembrance, that's the minute, that's the moment that Genesis, right? That God and you touch fingers.
it's yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. The going back to my childhood and connecting with that child within certain like breath work or whatever, or
Mm.
whatever it might be, has been pretty powerful and intense. And it's like one of the themes that came up with it's like, yeah, like he was just tired of doing adult shit. He was tired of being an adult too early to take care of me and take care of and it's like and there's this duty of responsibility handover where I was like, hey man, this isn't your work anymore. And it was like it was interesting to see that yeah, he didn't get the as much of the childhood as he wanted, or he needed. That that having to remove love from the equation was challenging. So then, being able to reconnect with him now in this sphere, he's much happier and more grateful for that journey, more grateful
Yeah.
for the connection of God into all of this as well.
Hmm.
Or God, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you
Like,
can call it anything. It's yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And for me on that one, it's like, um, my thoughts around that is it's like, okay, in order to dictate to me that there is no God or energy source or whatever it is, it's cool. You have to conjure the concept of this thing in your mind, which is where God's created within yourself. Because how
Mm.
else do you create something external if you don't create it within your own realm and understanding? You have to create this to then tell me that that thing that you now know is a thing doesn't exist, which means that you've just given it the power of existence. So what you want to do is people want to take that, whatever that is, and be like, oh, I don't have enough space in my realm and I'm scared of that. Because it's really fear governs most people's decision making, right? People operating from a place of fear. So they put it in a box, lock that box, sit on it, refuse to ever look in it. And they're like, God or the grand spirit or whatever it is doesn't exist. It's like, okay, I'm not going to try to unpack all of that, but it's like the greatest gift for me is stepping into the fear of God and that there being a God. Like it's actually, and since having that element of God and acknowledgement of that in my life, everything that I step into, because when I go to these ayahuascas and all these ceremonies and things and everything else in my life, the bigger the fear, and I'm not talking existential, or if it's an existential fear, you're like, yeah, don't walk close to the edge of that cliff. Stupid, right? But you've got these fears that are really what I call the breadcrumbs of God, where it's like just trying to get you further along your path and give you a little layup, little alley oop. And you're just like, and it comes in the form of fear. And every time I step into that fear, every time I step into deeper or surrender to the challenge or the darkness, I am rewarded immensely by God for courage. So and which is actually to me, I don't get, after the military career and what I was doing, I don't like by my last trip, I was, I'm sitting in a helicopter with a dog strapped to me, ammunition, guns at night, flying and waiting to skydive out of it, and I would sleep in it. Like my heart rate would be so low, I just sleep the whole time. And someone would tap me, they'd be like, "All right, 3 minutes screaming." Like they'd have to do a colored lights to explain to me we're jumping. I'm like, cool. I'd go back to sleep until they tap me on 1 minute. And they'd be like, "In 1 minute, we're jump. There's nothing else I need to do. I'm completely prepared to jump out of this aircraft for the last 2 hours." But it's like after that, I don't get this rush of courage or adrenaline or whatever format it is anymore. The medicines, they've given me an opportunity to find that. And through this path of God, it's given me an opportunity to step further into that courage. And the more I do that, the more I'm rewarded, right? So that's become the unknown, completely unknown, like far out of left field sort of blessing in my life that I wasn't prepared for. And I know America is for the most part is like really wants to run away from that God concept.
Well,
But
it's religion. There's a difference between God and religion. There's a difference between what you're talking about and the thing that happens in organized religion, which I think tends to prey on fear and hate more than lift up in love and understanding.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
two different things.
correct, 100%. Yeah, I've also become less naive to the fact that maybe there is some general like um, to say evil in the world. Like I just thought evil was, I thought it was like it was misguided love. But I actually think that there is some of that in the world, and I have to face the naivety, my naivety as a young man that might not actually be the case. But there is some general, misguidedness, deliberate misguidedness on that front. So
Yeah,
that's it.
it's the balance. As much love and goodness, there's probably an evil and hateful counter to it. But I do think hate is the absence of love. Like the true hate, when you talk to someone and they're so passionate in their hate, I
Yeah.
think, wow, this person's really passionate, which is but right up against love, really. What
Yeah.
they're afraid of, I think, for the
Yeah.
most part, in their hate, is seeing themselves in the thing they hate. That's what
Yeah.
they're really afraid
That's,
of,
that's
which
what
is
I've
weird.
learned. If I have a frustration with someone or whatever, it's just a reflection of the parts of me that most
Hmm.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, and yeah, I feel that. Like I feel they're doing it out of ultimate love for themselves and fear of losing whatever it is that they have.
Or hate for themselves. Self-loathing. Self-loathing is a hell of a motivator, you know?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that one. You can't hate yourself to success, but damn well we try.
Yeah.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
that fa-
So, really quick though, I want to touch on, I've kept you so long. The Warrior Refit Foundation, is that doing well?
To be honest, no, right? And it's relative. I would say no, because what I worked out that just became a vassal for spreading the word. Um, and my ultimate goal was to get it into Veterans Affairs and serving militaries actually, because it would be so much better to be prevention rather than cure on many fronts, which it does. It can be used as preventive medicine for regenerative. It's literally cells entering your body that are undesignated cells. They find damaged or missing cells and they fix them, right? And the technology is only getting better every year. What saved my life is now probably 3 to 5 times more efficient and one third the price. So
Yeah.
it's like, so what I did was I got a mate who's an extremely successful entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur that we built a company out now. And that basically trying to build out an entire national stem cell company across the United States so that we can basically get the message out there, correlate as much data as possible, and then get that into the hands of those veteran congressmen that do care. The reason I want to affect America is not just was I in the thick of it with those guys over there, because those helicopter pilots were not Australian, they were American, they were there every day. They came into snowstorms to fly us out, they came into gun dudes like almost getting shot out of the sky together on so many occasions. It was like it's a shit show. So it's like we're all in it together, right? So as far as I'm concerned, those nations that I serve with, it's like one in, all in. But it's like in America, if they do it, if they change it and they introduce stem cells into your system here, then the rest follow. So building out the company and creating a format where the more public that do it, the more veterans that do it, the more people that do it, and the more that I can affect that space and get this across. So it's like becoming a pretty interesting and very fast moving journey to do this, by the way,
That's
which,
great and wonderful. And I think, yay, more power to you. I hope that everyone far and wide can
yeah,
utilize this technique and this treatment
yeah,
because it's pretty much a no brainer. You know,
it,
it works. It's been proven to work. So what's the problem? You know,
that's it. It's been proven to work immensely, but I think there's an agenda by the
always.
pharmaceutical industry to like, they'll get control of it eventually. That's how they move, but it's a big machine and it needs to move slow so it doesn't
Yeah.
rock the boat because of
Pharmaceutical companies don't want us getting better.
it,
Certainly not.
it's illogically in their interest, you
Yeah.
know, like it would rock the boat significantly. But yeah, so I took that's how that has shifted to this, which has become service. It's become like really awesome to help people like, you know, just across the nation that are struggling with these things and give them some hope and give them some journey. I haven't yet to come across anyone who hasn't had any results at all. So it's
Yeah.
like it is moving the needle there. With all the journey that I've done, even though I've done my best to summarize it, I find myself working with men in performance orientation and really excavating their past to orientate their future and get their whole life in together. And that's been extremely rewarding as well. You can help change these guys' lives for the better and how that changes their family, how it heals their family, their relationship, what they do with their life, where they go with their life is profound. And I've been working with, if I get my choice, because I've only got so many people I can work with at a time, I work with veterans. And it's been immensely rewarding. I've even got like, a mate of mine humble enough to go, hey, would you work with me? And just watching him change and watching him step into his life and the things that have come for that are extremely, profound. So I'm glad that my suffering isn't all like in in vain, like just
Yeah.
lost in that journey.
Well, you went from service to your nation to service to the world. I think that's a nice transition.
Yeah. Yeah. I had this question come up. So when I was, because service is great, right? But I had this thing come up when I went to Australia after Burning Man, and I had this moment where I set myself and it's like, all right, you're not dying anymore. You're not going to die. So that identity is not part of you anymore. Sweet. I'm not the dying person. Not that I go talk to people like, hey, I'm a dying person, but it would be like something that I had to identify at that time that I'm the fighting for my life person. This is my job. And I'm like, cool. What would you do if you had cancer or you were finding out you're dying or you went to jail or whatever, and suddenly that wasn't the case and you had your life back? What was the one thing you'd do? So I searched my soul pretty deep. I'm like, went back to my childhood. I'm like, the only two things I loved were war and acting, in particular war movies, right? So I'm like, okay, well, what's there to that? And I ended up going down this path of just diligently studying acting intensely, for, I don't half cock things, um, for like, a year and a half. And then I'm like, okay, cool. All right, well, all right, I guess it's time. I'll go to, I took that up as a passion, right? Because I'm like, oh, it's the only art I've ever loved and I ever liked. And I'm like, cool. And I'm also, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I don't have to, rush anything anymore, right? My life's great. My journey's great. And I will achieve whatever it is that I want to achieve. I've worked out in whatever period of time. It doesn't matter. I get there. Took that up and ended up going to LA. Then they had that strike. It's just so
Yeah.
funny. I got here and I'm like talking to some producers and people that I know because I've just met a lot of people. And then they had the strike and I'm like, ended up meeting one. He's like, well, we're probably still shooting out in Bulgaria. And I'm like, oh, really? And like 2 days later, I caught a flight to Bulgaria. Just appeared in the casting director's office. I'm like, hey, I'm just going to be local. Anyway, it ended up working out pretty well for me. Got a few films out there last year they're on, when they're released, they'll be on Paramount Plus. So it's like, it was like I was able to do that side as well, which is like, so I'm still like in the pursuit of doing things well beyond my control, well beyond my abilities, and just like getting there.
Hey, half the battle is showing up.
Half the battle is showing up, but yeah, I've managed to really come full circle on the things that I want to do in my life for the rest of it, right? I think one of the most beautiful journeys of this whole working on my spiritual side, working on my emotional, my mental, physical, everything. I'm so much more in tune with the meditations, with my body, everything, that I'm able to like now orientate myself onto a calm path of things that I'm happy to do for the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's been, it's kind of, like I'm probably in one of the most prosperous states of my entire life now after this journey.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing this story with me, your story.
You're welcome. I mean, I'm happy to. There's layers here of what I would not have shared in the past, but now I'm like an open book truth, forthcoming with everything and every information that, like, because if I can, so you have a veteran that listens or whatever, if I can help one guy
Hmm.
and take his path to step into courage to talking about or whatever, it's, for me, that's a fair deal. I'll spend whatever time it takes to or let's say save, but let's say to reorientate one veteran. That's the deal.
I'm with you on that one for sure. Yeah. Tell people how can they find you?
Instagram. I don't like multiple layers of social media. I hate it. So I'm just decided Instagram is it, and Instagram is where if anyone wants me, they'll find me.
Yeah. And I'll
Yeah.
put a link on Hey Human Podcast's link page so they can find you easy.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Susan. I appreciate
Great talking with you. Next time you're in LA, give me a call. I'm in Santa Monica. We'll go grab coffee. You're a cool dude.
Totally down for that. I keep, last time I was there, I was staying, which is a few weeks ago, I was staying in Westwood. I'm slowly learning more about the city.
Yeah.
I do not like your traffic, but
Nope.
I
I
no.
walk everywhere, so it's fine. I live in a walkable city. In Santa Monica, I live right by the beach, so I walk to everything.
Well, that's just terrible. I did stay in Venice Beach and I learned some shit out there too. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, when I first went there, I'm like, I love the beach. I'm Australian. I'll work this out. And I was like, this is where I finally got Grand Theft Auto. There's only two
Yeah.
types. There's two types of people. There's people Grand Theft Auto shit. I'm like, oh my God, that wasn't actually a far-fetched imagination in the game. There's like the person screaming in the street, maybe with a knife or a bat. And then there's a sweater wearing State Farm commercial looking dude.
Yeah.
And
It's a wilding area. That is for sure.
there's like you're one of the two categories. You look super ordinary because you're not screaming in the street and you're wearing a sweater, or you're screaming in the street. So
Yeah.
I got my fill of
Santa
um,
Monica is a little more chill.
yeah. You guys are definitely chill. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks for relativity down there. It was getting a
Yeah.
bit more in Venice.
Be well, safe travels, and thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening, everybody.
Thanks, Susan.
Hell of a story. I look forward to the book.
Get this. I figured I'm just going to keep doing cool shit until I'm too old to move my body and then write stuff.
Amen. I think that works. That's what Ian Fleming did.
Yeah, right. Hell yeah, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
All right. Have a good day. Bye. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.